Okay, I've started the recording now. All right. So this is the first slide I would like to talk about. As I said, I will not be going through all the slides, but whatever is required to give you the context of what we really are learning and why we are learning it and where we see ourselves once we learn this thing. So this diagram which you see right now is depicts a sort of SDLC or software development life cycle, which is the requirement comes from a client, that is your stakeholder, also called a stakeholder. Either it's a client or it could be a stakeholder. Stakeholder can also be part of the same company, maybe your boss or maybe product owner, it could be anyone. But essentially this is the person who needs that software to be built, right? So that's why we say it's a client or a stakeholder. Then the stakeholder wants something to be created, and then they will give this requirement to a business analyst team, also called as BA in short. So it's a team which comprises of people who understands business, right? They understand the need of the client, they understand what needs to be created, not how it's to be created. The how part goes to the development team, but they actually kind of understand from client, they list it, they document the whole requirement, they create some documents called as function requirement documents, user stories, use cases, these kind of things they will create so that the requirement can be conveyed to the development team. Now once it reaches to development team will start developing the software. They will do understand the requirement which is given to you by business analysts. They will understand the requirement, they will try to recreate it or try to implement those requirements in the code. Once that structure or code is ready, they will give it to a team called as QA, also called as quality assurance. Now this quality assurance activities involve tasks which are related to checking the quality aspects of the software. Now quality aspects can be divided into many different dimensions. Now the most important there is the functional test. Now what is functional test? Functional test, as the name suggests, means that you need to test the functionality of the application, also called as behavior of the application. A simple example of a behavior or functionality is, let's say there is a requirement for an e-commerce business, something similar to Amazon.in. Now if you have that Amazon.in software, what is the basic functionality of it? That is your search, that you should be a user should be able to search a product in that software, search any item in the software. Now that becomes one of the functionality or a behavior. Now that functionality or behavior was first given to business analyst team by a client. They documented it in some format, development team built that. Now QA team need to test it. Now before they test it, they first always go to BA again to get that document. Whatever the document is has written in that document, they actually read it, and based on what is written, that is what should happen, and what is in actuality happening, they compare these two things. So QA activity is always about expected versus actual. That is what QA activities is about. There is a set of expected, that means this should happen, and then they do it, and that doing thing become actual, and then they match if actual is equal to expected. So this is all about quality assurance. In a very layman terms, this is all about it, expectation versus actual. Okay. Now when you test the functionalities, that what should be the functionalities of the application and what really it is doing now, that becomes your functional test. And there will be a team called as functional QA team who does that. Now there another thing called as non-functional QA team. Now there are also very lot of non-functional aspects of the application. For example, how it is performing, what is the load, how much load it can take, at what point it would break, stress testing, right? Then user experience, UI, UX, right? These all are will come under the non-functional aspects. They are non-functional, but they are nonetheless important, because if there is a very good application with lot of functionality but it failed to respond within 10 within 5 to 6 seconds, the user will bounce out of it, out of that site. That means loss of business. So this activity is also very important. you can understand it just by simple word called maybe performance, right? So distinguish between these two things is, here you check the functionalities and here you check the performance. Not only performance, there are a hell lot of other things also. For example, security also becomes part of non-functional aspects of a software, but we don't have to go to that deep. We will be focusing on, our effort will be focusing mostly towards functional aspects of things, not non-functional. Now there are third thing also which you see here called as automation QA team. Now automation QA team these days are always part of the functional QA team, because with automation, when you automate, you always automate a functional scenario. Okay, and this is where you guys going to be when you start your automation journey. Once you're done with this course, and let's say you get inside a company for a project which is actually doing automation testing, this is where you will find yourself inside a project automating a functional test case using a software or a robot which you will create, and that robot will automatically will be comparing expected and actual. Because here, when you do it manually, there is expectation, there is actual, you do it, and then you manually compare it. Who is manually doing it? You yourself, as a human being does it. But when you are automating it, as the name suggests, you are automating a test. So in this case, the test is automated. The purpose of test was expected value and actual value comparison, but in this case the software does it automatically. Advantages, we'll talk about advantages later, but most importantly, which is very evident, which is the functional person, or if it is being done by a human being, he can only do it like 8 hours in a day, not more than that, or 9 hours. But this could do, if you're doing it in an automated way, this could be done 24/7, 365, and there will be no cost, absolutely no cost for doing it. Here the person has to be paid, you see. So you are saving money, you are saving time, and you are getting more accuracy, because the air is human makes mistakes, they miss bugs. But if you're doing it or writing a good automation test case, your money will be saved, your time will be saved, and you will be having more accuracy. So these are the three main advantages why people do it, and that's the reason almost all the projects in the world are trying to automate, not only test, the complete life cycle. It's also called as DevOps. If you have heard about DevOps is all about automating the whole flow. And when you want to automate the whole flow from the requirement gathering to the delivery, you have a very important component in between called as automation testing. Because without automation testing, it acts as a uh, automation test actually act as a gateway to the delivery. Without this most important component, the continuous delivery cannot happen, DevOps will just fail. Okay, and that's the reason this is very important skill set to have in these times. Okay, so I have explained some fundamental about why we are doing, because this why part is very important for anyone to do anything. Without this understanding the why aspect of the task or purpose, it has no meaning. You will not be able to do it for long. So why part I have tried to explain why you should be learning this, why this is important. Any questions so far in this? Of course, a lot of things you might not be able to understand fully. Few of you are already in the industry, would know exactly what I'm talking about here. But people who are maybe not in the industry or from other industry, they're trying to come in inside this software industry, maybe this might be new thing for you. Of course, this require more detailing, this requires more reading on your part as well. Don't just think that I'll attend the session and I will just get it. It's not going to happen. You need to read a lot about these things. I can give you references. I have given you a background. I will give you some references for your own reading as well. Never mind. Any questions on this? I'll give you like 30 seconds to think and ask. All right, I guess not. So I'll move on to the next one. This slide is actually is very similar to what we talked about here. What you see here is actually, oh, Wait, I think I've clicked somewhere. Never mind. So this slide is about a one cycle. That means a requirement came in and the B understood it, gave it to development team gave it to QA then tested it, said okay, it signed it off, and then it was given to deployment delivery team, and then it's launched the product. Now this is just one cycle. Now, in a real way, in a real world project, it doesn't happen just one off. It happens continuously. That is what we call as iterative and incremental model. And this is also called as agile way of development and testing. That is, you develop a software, you test a software and deploy the software, and then it goes again in cycles. And each cycle is called as sprint if you are using a methodology called as Scrum. And most of the teams usually follow Scrum methodology, which has a specified duration. That duration is called a sprint, and each sprint is responsible for developing, testing, and deploying. In each of end of the each sprint, you have a product which works, a new functionality which works, right? So we'll talk more about Scrum and test and Scrum and Agile later. But the idea is this, that this is just not a one off. This is actually, if this is happening only for the one time, that this becomes a waterfall model. But if you're doing this for every, in a frequency manner, in frequent manner, then it becomes a agile way of development testing. Also, you can understand it as simply iterative and incremental. Okay, any questions on this? All right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, carry on.
So I didn't understand the difference between Agile and Scrum.
All right. So, okay, Agile is just a set of guidelines. It's
Okay.
nothing else. Agile, as name suggests, Agile means you want to do something fast. Okay. So
Yeah.
previously we used to have this kind of model called as waterfall model, where the requirement used to come, everything was documented, and then development team will start developing it. They will develop it. Now, while the development team is developing, and maybe at that time the client thought, oh, I wanted this to be changed, can I change it now? The development team will say no. That means it is very rigid. The process was very rigid. Once the requirement is set, you're not supposed to be changing it. But that doesn't happen in an agile way. In agile way, it says you have to continuously develop in a short cycles, step by step, and after each cycle you need to ask for the feedback from the client. So the client feedback is very important here. Now this session which we are right now doing is really not about agile. We will be doing some agile sessions also in the future, where I would be explaining you agile and scrum and sprint and how this works. This is actually is something to do with the project management. So agile way of doing things is always about iteration and incrementation for a product in a continuous cycle. uh, and Scrum is a methodology which implements the agile principles. So agile is set of four principles. Rather, I would just simply show you so that you can start reading. So agile principles, or rather manifesto, I think. Manifesto. You see, this is agile website. It says only four things. Okay, so manifesto for agile software development, it says only four things: individual and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. This is what I was talking about, that you need to continuously take the feedback from the client. Not like you have told me this and now I only develop this, I will not change the requirement. There is no contract negotiation. Customer collaboration, customer will be part of the development cycle, right? Then responding to change so that it becomes more adaptive. Okay, so this is just guidelines. You see, there's nothing else here. This is what agile is. Now there are methodologies which are built on this idea. So this four ideas, there are different methodologies. One methodology is called as Scrum. Now, Scrum is a methodology which uses these principles to design a way you should develop you should be doing a project management, or you should be developing a product. When you do that when you do a product development or a project management, which adheres to these principles, then you say I am 80% compliant to Agile Manifesto. As I said, a lot of this might not be making much sense to you now. We will be having a separate session on Agile and Scrum later. Okay, what you really need to focus right now is there are no product which works or which happens without Agile methodology. Mostly people use Scrum. They can also use Kanban. There is a different methodology. As I said, there are different methodologies which implements different aspects of Agile Manifesto. So one is your Scrum, then your Kanban. I think you all also heard about XP, Windows XP, Extreme Programming. It's again a methodology by which you can develop a software. So Windows version XP was built based on this principle of extreme programming. That's why they named it Windows XP. Uh, Similar to that, there are a few more, but most famous is Scrum. Again, I will be, if you're interested, I will be posting some links also for you to do a pre-reading, some reading about it, what is Agile, what is Scrum, and how this works. But we're definitely going to have this session later.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
But I would just suggest you read this as well.
Okay.
All right. Any more questions, guys, on this?
No.
Okay. Now I'm not going to talk about some more slide which we have here, which is actually not in today's agenda. Today's agenda is about how to make you guys who are joining for the first time to get above the ground and start doing the thing which we really need. So one thing is you need to understand why we are doing this. I've explained that. Second is you need to know what is the installations you need to do. We have already discussed that. Now the third part of today's session is about creation of the project, like how you will be creating a project. The detailed instructions to go and create a project is, I have explained them here at the bottom of this page. So there is how you'll go and create up your first project is what I have explained here with a lot of details, but I will also do it in today's session so that you can really ask questions at runtime right now. Okay, I can choose to do it in IntelliJ, or I can choose to do it in Eclipse. I'll try to explain both these softwares. So first I'll go open my Eclipse to show you that. So I'll open Eclipse. Okay, so if you're doing it for the first time, it might ask you about, wait, let me close the open windows. Right, so it might ask you about this something called as workspace. It will choose something by default. You don't change it, leave it as it is, click on launch. Now this will only come when you have installed JDK and then you've installed Eclipse. Once you installed both in this the same sequence, only then you will be able to, open the Eclipse. Now once you see this, you will have two options. By the way, you won't see anything here because you're doing it for the first time. If you're doing it for the first time, you won't see these things here. You will have to go and create a project. To do that, there are two ways. One way is you just go to new and click on Java project, or if you don't see Java project here, which you might not be seeing because if you're doing it for the first time, it doesn't just come automatically. So you have to go to other, and here you have to search for Java and click on Java project. Click on next. Then it will ask you for the name of the project. You can say my first. I've already created my first. I'll say my second project, right? And then don't touch anything else, leave everything as it is, don't touch it. uh, if you want to play around, it's okay, but I would, in the beginning, if you're very new to it, don't do anything stupid, otherwise things will not work and you will kind of cry, this not working, it's not working. So don't touch anything, just put project name, click on next. When you go here, you will again find some details, don't have to worry about for now. Of course, the knowledge of what is this and what is that is needed, but not now. Trust me, you don't need to know all these things now. Only focus on how will I create my first project, my first class, my first object, my first program. and these things, these details about all of these tabs and this and what is library, what is this, what is that, is for later, not for now. Otherwise you will get too confused and you will not be able to do the basic thing as well. So only do what I'm directing, only do that. I'm right now telling you how to go and create a new project, just start creating that new project. Then you, all you have to do, so far what I've done is I've only added my name here, project name here, and that's it. Just go and click on finish. uh, Click on create. Now once you do that, you will get a project name, my second project. You will see something called as JRE library here, Java SE15 library here, and a folder called as SRC. Few of you might get this option of which I just got of pop up to create some module and all. These are advanced Java, sorry, later version Java concepts about modules and all. Again, don't have to worry too much about it. You can choose to delete this file. It is nothing in it. Okay, I'm not dealing with modules right now. So now I have a simple project as a src folder inside this, and that's it. Okay, now this really, what it really means is there is a folder in my Eclipse workspace folder, and inside that folder I have another folder which is named as my second project. Inside that I have a folder called as src. So what you see here as a project name and src and packages, they are nothing but the folder structure inside your uh, directory, or inside your C drive or D drive, wherever you are creating it. It's nothing else. Now src is a folder, and by default Java dictates it's always better to create your class files inside a src folder, because that's where it actually look for the Java files. So I'll go and create a file. Rather, before I go and create a file called as my first class, I should rather be creating my first package. One again, package, as I said, is nothing but a folder structure. It's just a folder. So I'll go and click on package. I can choose to give it a name, let's say com.vit or vision it. Then I'll go and click on finish. Once I do that, if I go back to my workspace, I would see another folder created called as com. Inside that com folder, I will be seeing another folder called as vision it. This dot really represents a subfolder. That means vision it is a folder which has been created inside com. Okay, now is the time to create my first class. So I will go and click on a class here. Then it will ask me to give it a name, so I'll say my first class, and I can choose to click on these two things which will do something which I'll explain in a while. Once I create this, click on finish. Now what you see right now is a file. Its name is my first class. Its extension is .java. So one thing to notice here is whatever code you're going to write, whatever Java code you're going to write, it's always going to be residing inside a file which is ending with an extension called as .java. There cannot be a Java code which is not ending in a file, or whose name is not ending with .java. So .java extension is a must to keep a Java code. Okay. Second thing is, one Java file usually should have one public class only. Rather, it could have multiple classes, but one class has to be public. And ideally, the good practice is that you should always have only one class inside of one file. So here one file is my first class.java. This is a file. Now this file should have only one public class mentioned like this here. So public class and the name of the class, and this name should match the file name, right? These are some rules, guidelines, etc., which you have to follow when you learning something new. This is something which is you're learning for the first time. You might ask, can we create more classes, can we do this, can we do, yeah, you can do hell lot of things, but now is not the time to do it. Now, right now, you will be following only basic fundamental. Just do as directed. You can go and create new classes also, it's fine, but don't do that. One class, one file, that's enough. Okay. Now there are a lot of things which needs explanation here. For example, what is public, right? What is static, what is void, We'll try to explain all of this. I'll try to explain the basic things here, but there are different ways by which you can declare a method, declare a class, declare a variable. And again, I will not be going into those details right now. I will be following only basic things, will be telling only basic things which is essential for you to get your work started. Okay, so let me explain what we have right now, and I'll try to do something in this so that you understand uh, what is the purpose of these statements. So one here is public. Public simply means, it's also called as access modifier, which actually means who can access it, or from where you can access this specific entity. Okay, now the other thing which could be instead of public is default, private, protected. So there are four access modifiers available. This could be applied to different entities inside a class. Okay, right now what you see is public. Class is public, that means it is accessible from anywhere, of course within the project, not outside the project. Nothing can be accessed outside the project. But if you're creating a lot of package structure, something similar to, for example, this, you see the lot of packages here, right? So if you don't want a class to be accessible outside the package, then you can do something related to these kind of public and private thing, and then you can control who have access to your class. And this is available to be applied to your methods as well as your uh, variables, which I'm going to talk about later. But you can apply this to any other entities within a class. Okay, now next thing which you see here is called as constructor. Now what is a constructor? Constructor is a special kind of method. Rather, I should be talking about method first, but because we have a constructor here, so let me better explain this first. A constructor is a special kind of method which gets triggered the moment you create an object of the class. Right now there is no object of the class. I have only one class. I'm not creating in the object anywhere else, but I'll show you how to create an object of the class in a while. But just remember, this constructor is a special kind of method. I'll also write it here. It's a special kind of method. What is important to note here is the name of the constructor, the name of the method exactly matches with the name of the class. If it is not, then it doesn't, it's not a constructor. Okay, so constructor name should always be should be matching with the name of the class file. Only then it becomes a constructor. Now what you see here is called as public static void main. If you have any time in the past, if you have any exposure to any programming languages, you would see something called as, or you must have heard about main method. Now main method usually is present in almost all programming languages, which actually means the starting point of the project or starting point of the program. If you have a program and doesn't have a main method, that means the compiler or whoever is going to run it, the runtime of that software, will not be able to know from where to start. What is the starting point? You need to have a main method. Mostly it is the case with all the compiler, all the software which has compilers. Usually in interpreters you don't need that, but in all the languages which are compiled, or which follows these principles of compilation and all, will have a concept called as main method. So public static void main is a method which actually gets triggered the moment you say run. When you say run the program, this is a method which gets triggered. Okay, it starts with public static void main. As I said, I will not be talking about the exact signature of it, but you just remember, to start a program you always have to have public static void main there. Okay, now there is one thing or other two thing which is missing in from this class, which is important. One is your variables, and second is your methods, right? Now again, I'll go back to basic again, go back to Java basic, which is whatever Java code you're writing, it has to be in a file which is ending with the .java file. Inside that file, there has to be an entity or a block, I would call it block, which is a kind of which can also be called as a class. So there has to be a block which we call it as a class. Inside the class, there can be two things. One is variables, also called as attributes, and methods, also called as behaviors. So a class should always have these two things, variable and attributes. Is it mandatory? No. You can just remove everything. Then still there will be a class. It just does nothing, right? But why would you create a class which does nothing? So it's better to have variables and methods, right? Because a class should mean something, it should represent something. When you say something, something always will have an attribute or some characteristic which could uniquely or which could identify that specific entity. Second thing is that something will have some sort of behaviors, right? For example, a car. Now, car, if I want to say a car is an object, right? Car is something which we can see, perceive, touch, right? Now, the thing is, a car can have two things. One, car will have some identities, for example, number plate, right? It has its unique identity. Then its color, its height, its engine size, horsepower. These are all characteristics of a car. What are its behaviors? Its behaviors are car can drive. This is the most important behavior. Car can honk, make noise. These are behaviors, something which car can do, right? So if I want to create my class, let's say car, so what I'll do is I'll go create a new class again. I'll say this is my car. I'll go and click on finish. Now car can have what? Car can have property. So I'll simply say int id, or let's say number plate, with some value int, there's a unique number for each engine, chases number maybe. So these are what? These are its attributes. Now what is the methods? Public void drive. Now this is a method, right? So a car class has these two things, attributes, also called as variables or instance variables, and this is called as method or behavior. All right. So this is what I'm trying to explain you. Now I need to make sure that this card does something, right? Right now, this is nothing. It has, for example, number plate. It doesn't has a number plate. Chases number doesn't have a chases number. Drive. Maybe I'll just simply write system dot out dot print ln uh, car with number plate as number plate. Let me reduce the font a bit. And chases number as chases number. Let me bring it to the new line, is driving. So I have also implemented the behavior of this class. For example, this is called as method or behavior. Come on, never mind, I'm not changing the, I think some spelling mistake, never mind. Method and attributes. So this is my car, but this car is not really an actual car. This is a blueprint of the car. So class is always considered to be a blueprint. Okay, so you need to create an object out of it, to also called as the process also called as instantiation, which simply means, if I put an analogy for this car example, a car is a concept which has no unique and existence of its own. But when you have a Alto or a Wagoner or a Ferrari, that becomes an conceptualization or an instantiation of that class. So class is car. For example, class which name as car is nothing but a concept or a blueprint. The If you create an object of the car, it becomes an actual car, and that is what we call by saying when we want to create an object of a class, that means we are instantiating it. That means we are actually creating an something which is an implementation of that specific class. Maybe it's a tongue twister for me, and maybe it's a puzzling for you. Don't worry, what you see right now, if you don't get this analogy, don't worry. Just see, I'm writing a Java code. I'm trying to create a class car. Car has these two things: number plate and chases number, and it has a behavior drive. Now what I want to do is to create actual car out of this. So what I'll do, I'll go to this one. Let me remove this thing from here. I have only public static void main here. So what I'll do, I'll start creating something. Now, first of all, what I'll do, oh, I missed to add one important thing here, which is a constructor. So you remember we talked about constructor. That is, constructor is used to instantiate the attributes or characteristic of the specific class. So how to create the constructor? We'll say public, we'll say car, and as I said, it is a special kind of method, but the special kind has one important thing here. This is also a method, this is also a method, but the difference is this method has a return type as void, or that means a method can have a return type of void, int, etc., etc., but a constructor doesn't have a return type. That's how you can know that it is a constructor. Second important thing is it will always have the name as similar to the name of the class. Okay. Now there is one more concept here in constructor that is also called as parameterized constructor. The idea here is simple. The idea is when you instantiate the class, you need to assign some values to these two variables, right? There are different ways of doing it, which I'm going to talk. So I'm going to talk about those two the ways of doing this. First of all, let's only do the simple thing. That is, I'll go and create a car object. I'll say car. Let's say I'm going to create a uh, simple object or simple car object. Car1 is equal to new car, and that's how you create a object of from a class. So you use a keyword called as new. You will say car1 equal to new car name of the class, and it will create the object. Once you create the object, when you do write the variable name and you say dot, you get the members of it. So these are also called as members. So these two are the members, and this is also a member. You won't see this there because it's a constructor. It is not supposed to be called explicitly from outside. It will automatically call the moment you create an object. So it will not see, you will not see this specific member there when you do a dot, but you definitely will be seeing attributes as well as other methods. So you see, if I go here, I do a dot, I see chases number, I see number plate, and I also see the method called as drive. Okay, so these three things I'm seeing here. Now I created the object, but I want it to have some values, right? So I'll say chases number. Let's say this is chases number. I'll say car1 dot number plate. I'll say this is my number plate, and then if I do a car1 dot drive, my program is complete. That means I have actually created a car, a unique car. This is my unique car. So this is my first car implementation. Now I can choose to create another car which has different implementation. My second car, sorry. I'll change the variable name and I'll use this here. All right. So I have these two important entities being created. One is this, and second one is this. Okay. I think I made a mistake. That is, these are supposed to be integers. So I will just change them to integers, not the string. All right, now I can actually run the program. So let me show you how to run it. So I'll go here, click on run as Java application. You see the first car, number plate as this, chassis number as this, driving. Second car is this. Okay. I can go inside the method to see the implementation of it. So if you see, all I'm doing in this method is the printing of the variables which I have here. So this statement prints chassis number and number plate which I've set from outside the program from here, and it's just printing it. Okay. Now, for, as I said, few of you will not be able to follow exactly what is happening. Okay, for example, you might not know what is the car, what is this new keyword, what it is doing, I mean, what is this value. If you're doing it really for the first time, you never touched programming before, these things are obvious, this will happen, this confusion will be there. But how will you get out of this problem? The best way to get out of this is you when you practice, not by me teaching you, not by attending the lecture sessions, not by this, by you doing it. In the beginning there will be hand holding. I'm trying to spoon feed you on these basic things about how to create a object, how to create a class, etc, etc. There are more to it. I deliberately did not mention lot of things. For example, what is this, and what is this return type, and sorry, what is the return type, what is this variable type. I did not mention this. The reason being, I don't want you guys to be flooded with lot of information in the very beginning. This is what I have also talked about in my previous sessions when old people who joined my first few 3 classes. I said the same thing to those guys. If you're doing it for the first time, I'm saying this to you as well. Right now, only do as directed. Don't get hung up on lot of different details of things. Don't worry too much about details. What I've told you today is how to create a how to install, where you will fit in, how to create a project, how to create a class, how to create attributes, how to create constructor, how you will go and create the methods, how you will be creating an object, and how you will be setting the values in the object, and how you will create multiple objects. So these are the 5 6 things I've told you. This will bring, if you just follow this, just keep on doing this one step after another, this is all you need in the beginning. All right. So I've been speaking continuously from past, I think 40 minutes, 45, rather 1 hour. I would really be very happy if you can ask some questions if you have any. And I'm sure you must be having some questions. It's not really, it need not be about the code or technical things. It could be about anything. And I will be happy to answer.
So
So there are many ways of doing something. Okay. I understood what you're trying to say. You are trying to say why you are setting these values directly. Can we use a parameterized constructor to set it? So let me show you another way of doing this. I hope I have understood your question. So let me show you that method, another way of doing this, and then maybe you can tell me whether this is what you were really trying to ask. So one
okay,
way
sir.
of this, that I am setting these variables from outside, but this is not a good practice. Why it is not a good practice? Because the members, the attributes should not be accessible from outside. This is a deviation, or this is against the principles of an any design which you're going to put in any coding environment, any coding language. So the idea is that this should not be accessible, directly accessible from outside. That is, when I say card dot, I see chassis number plate here, I should not be able to see that. So the good practice is that you always make them as private. The moment, now thing is, the moment that you make them as private, you get errors here. That means you cannot access it now, right? Now how will I set the value? That's where you need a constructor. Now I'm talking about a parameterized constructor. That means while I create the object, I want these values to be passed while creating the object. So I'll want to say I want to create these objects like this and not do this. Right now, when I do this, it will again give me an error, because it will say when you create the class, you won't be having a constructor which can accept these two values. So what to do? I'll go to my car and I will create a parameterized constructor like this. So I will say dot int chases number, and then I will set this. I'll say this dot number plate is equal to number plate. Then I'll say this dot chases number is equal to chases number. What really I'm trying to do here is this represents these methods, sorry, these attributes. So when I say this dot number plate need to be set with the value which I am passing from outside, which is this one. And same is happening with this. This represents this specific attribute. I want this to be set with the value which is I'm sending from outside. And now all the error will go away. That means if I go here, the error is gone, and since I'm not able to access this, the same thing will go here as well. So I will be passing it like this here, removing these values. So my code is more simplified. That means the moment I'm creating an object, I am passing the values while I create the object. That's the use of a constructor. That means the moment I want to create a class, the moment I want to create an object, I can pass the values to initialize the values of the members. So that is why, that is what constructors are used for. I assume that this is what you are trying to ask, is it?
Yes, sir.
Right. So this can be done as well. There are multiple ways to do it. I can tell you one more way of doing this. It's also called as getter and setters. Okay. That maybe I'll talk about in later classes, because getter and setters is something which we definitely will be using later. So better I will explain it when actually we will be having that use case of using getter and setter. So one way, directly accessing the members. Second way is using constructor. Third way is using getter and setters. Okay.
Okay, sir.
All right. Let me see the chat for any more questions. Sorry. So once you create the class, uh, you can access all the members of that class, including attributes and your methods, provided you have right access modifiers. For example, if I go and change this to private, you will get an error here. It say not accessible. It will also tell you this method is from car is not visible. That means it is not accessible. You have to change the visibility. If you click on this, it will go and change it to default, or you can just mark it as public. If there's nothing mentioned, it goes towards the access modifier called as a default, which allows access within the same package. With this, we'll talk about when we talk about access modifiers. Guys, I'm waiting for your more questions. Is there any more questions?
The purpose of constructor, or you are, yeah,
So
explain this.
constructors are always used. The reason constructors are present in any programming language is to initialize the members. Of course, you can do hell lot of things when you create a constructor, but the purpose of constructor is to initialize the class. That means the moment you create an object of the class, the constructor is something which automatically gets called. So for example, there's one more thing I can do. I have to go here and call these methods one after another, right? I have to call this method here, I have to call this method here. What if I can just go inside this constructor, I'll mark this as private, I'll go here and I will call the method here. Okay, and I'll go to my class and I'll remove this. So you see, I'm not calling the method explicitly, but still if I go and run this, if I go and do a run Java application, the method drive is again called automatically. Why it's being called? Because the moment I am writing this statement, car1 equal to new car, that means the constructor will be called automatically without you having to call anything. It will automatically be called, the values will be passed, the values will be set, and then this method, which is this, will be executed because I have written the statement to call the method. So what I'm doing inside my constructor, another thing I'm doing it is initializing as well as calling a different method as well, right? So the you can do anything within the constructor because it's nothing but a method. You can, whatever you can do in a specific method or any method, you can also do it inside the constructor, but you need to make sure whether you need to do that or not. Okay, So the idea is of constructor present here or any programming language is simple. When you create the object and you want something to be executed, you put that inside constructor. That is the idea of the constructor. What, how you put it, what you will put it, that depends on your business situation, which you're going to see a lot later, because we're going to create a lot of constructors later as well. They are also used for a concept called as a dependency injection. For example, when we move on to our latest when we move on to our next sessions towards automation framework and all, then you will see some different kind of behavior. For example, if I go here, can I do I have it here? For example, if you see, this is a constructor of the class step defs common, and I am writing uh, something inside called as test context. Now I am really not creating any object of this, but there's a framework called as cucumber framework. It is automatically creating the object of it, and it is creating an object of this class also, and at runtime it is injecting it. This is called as dependency injection. So constructors can also be used for dependency injection. These are different use cases. As you ask, what are the cases where I can use constructors? There are many use cases depending on what problem you're trying to solve. Okay, so this Java programming language is just nothing but a tool which you can use to solve complex problems. Now, what kind of problem you're going to get, depending on that specific problem, you're going to create your solution.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I have reached towards what I wanted to talk about today. Tomorrow, I will be talking some more things, not really about this, but we will be moving on to some more concepts or some Java concepts of variables, if conditions, for loops, etc., which we already discussed in last class. And I asked you guys to go through that as well. So tomorrow the speed will be higher. So I assume I expect you guys to do this much what we have talked about today. Tomorrow I'm going to explain few programs. I'm going to talk about if conditions and for loops here and there, but I will also be talking about a program. So we will create a program which will make use of if conditions and for loops and arrays. And once I explain all of that, then I would give you guys some assignments to work on, and I would expect you guys to complete those assignments. So tomorrow's session is it's going to be about some more, again, basic fundamental principles of how you're going to create a program. So we are going to talk about, as I said, if, for, and arrays. So our program will be dealing with these three four things. Now, for you to really understand what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, you will have to have some pre-reading already. Otherwise, you will not understand much in the class. So I always request my students to do this activity. That is pre-reading. I already told you the topic which I'm going to talk about tomorrow. I expect you guys to pre-read it. Read about those things. I will be pushing in some reference material for you guys to look at. Do that. I don't expect you guys to know everything beforehand, but something which makes sense when I speak. That is all I need. Otherwise, I speak and you guys will actually just go to sleep. That is the bad use of my time as well as your time and money. I don't want that. So you guys have to really have this habit and practice of pre-reading, which is very very essential if you want to really learn something or anything new. All right. uh, okay. I'll give you 30 more seconds to think of any questions and ask, and if there is no question being asked in 30 seconds, maybe we can call it a day.